Hello, my name is Kush Singh and I'm reporting from Plano, Texas. Today I will be discussing a much debated topic about the top 10 impacts of the classical age on society today. Now, the number one thing on my list, or the greatest and most profound impact from the classical age to now, is Christianity, or the spread of Christianity and or Roman Catholicism. One key point of Christian theology is spreading the religion to others. As a result, Christianity spread from the Roman Empire to many other parts of the world. With the spread of Christianity to so many different people and places, naturally, the idea of Christianity would affect us today. Human rights, equality of sexes, and opposition against slavery were all concepts that Christians accepted that we recognize today. Education is also one of the effects from Christianity, and many of the first education centers were made for religious purposes and have now carried down to our education system today. The arts have also been impacted by Christianity, as many works of art, music, and literature have been done about Christianity and now are recognized as eternal masterpieces. Now, the question is, why is this number one on my list? Why is this number one over Judaism or Confucianism or all those other religions? Well, 1/3 of the entire population on Earth uses or worships Christianity, which makes roughly 2.3 billion people. Globally, almost every continent uses and worships Christianity. Therefore, Christianity has the biggest impact on society today. Well, number two on my list after Christianity, or the spread of Christianity, is the invention of concrete used to build roads and buildings and etc. made by the Romans. And so you might ask me, Kush, well, why is concrete one of the most basic things number two on your list? Well, the answer is pretty clear. Just imagine life without concrete. You use concrete, or you see concrete every single day in your life. You step outside and you're walking to school and you see concrete. You are in your car and you're driving on a road, and that road is made out of concrete. And concrete, basically, back then, and even now today, it expedited trade by creating a proper route for trading. A prime example is when cars and airplanes were not invented, it took nearly 50 hours to get the France to Britain in order to deliver cotton. With the use of roads, this expedited that process, and it only took 19 hours to get exports from France into Britain. Therefore, without roads today, our life would just not be the same. And how we would get to school and what our buildings would be made of, well, some buildings at least, it would just be extremely different. And I can't imagine, honestly, a life without the use of concrete, or a society without concrete. So, and this is number two on my list because this is definitely has had a more profound impact on society than Greek architecture and Roman architecture. I mean, roads are everywhere. They're everywhere. You go outside, there's roads. You go in 2 miles away, there's road. You go 1,000 miles away, and there's probably road there. So that has the second most profound impact on society today. Well, this is the Pantheon in Rome, Italy, and this is a prime example of concrete construction used in Rome during the classical age. Number three on my list is Greek architecture. Greek architecture has had a huge impact on how we shape and build and architect buildings today. For example, there are three types of columns that were made by the Greeks and are still used today. One being the Doric, which is plain and not much to it. And then there's the Ionic, and then there's the Corinthian. And the Corinthian is extremely fancy ones. Many houses to this date use these type of columns. For example, if you go to Willow Bend, a bunch of those houses have Corinthian columns maybe, and they also have the Doric columns to make the houses look very grandiose. Also, columns are used for just basic support in buildings. For example, in Mr. Stanton's room, there's a big column in there that follows the concept of a column and basically supports the upper ceiling so it doesn't crash onto us. And this is a huge architectural innovations. Amphitheaters, arches, monuments, aqueducts, theaters, and bathhouses. These are also other Greek architectural influences, but mainly it was just the columns. Greek has had a more profound impact on society than Roman architecture. The invention of the column has led to the capability of adding stories to a building. Even today, columns are used for design purposes and are shown in many of the government offices, while domes are not as prevalent, and the domes are by the Romans. Greek architecture is also prevalent in many other parts of the world, unlike a Roman architecture, which is not. Well, these are the three types of columns that I have talked about before: the Doric, Corinthian, and Ionic columns. I would have to give number 4 to Roman architecture, right after Greek. Since the Romans developed most of the basic architectural structures, their influence can easily be seen as a great influence in our modern architecture. The Romans also had architectural inventions with purposes that we copied. For example, various public places, roads, bridges, sewer systems, and stadiums were all originally made by the Romans. And though all this time, they all remain similar in structure and in function. Also, the material that the Romans used to this date remain quite similar to the materials that we use. Romans were the first to use concrete, and we still use concrete today. You can also see that a lot of the Roman architecture is quite evident in our society today. For example, the federal hall, courthouses, and even the Capitol building. Since the Romans invented the arch, and it is so essential to secure buildings, arches are seen everywhere, and therefore so is Roman architecture. Americans also show some tribute to the influence of Romans by making many government buildings look very Roman. Although Romans have had quite a profound impact on society in America, from what I've seen and noticed, Greek architecture seems to win the battle between Roman and Greek. Although Roman architecture has still had a very big impact on society today, I would have to place Roman architecture after Greek architecture, simply because columns are more essential and there are other ways of supporting a building other than arches. But columns, you kind of have to have columns in your buildings. Well, this is one of the government buildings in the United States, and as you can see, there's a big dome on the top of this building. This comes from Roman influences from the classical age. Number 5 on my list would probably be Confucianism and filial piety. Filial piety has greatly affected our ethics and relationships, as it shows ideas of Confucius versus filial piety. Ideas created by Confucius still lives on in our culture despite time and the movement of this idea. Confucius once said, "Filial piety is the foundation for morality." I think this is especially true as parents try to instill their moral values into their children. This is often prevalent in Asian societies, as I would know. Nowadays, parents still bring up their children in accordance to Confucian views, expecting a respect, obedience, and care from their children. Parents from classical times to now have the thinking that since they brought you onto the earth and provided for you, in turn, they should have the utmost love and respect from you. Also, seniority plays a big role in who commands a respect, as the younger ones have to submit to elders. Filial piety impacts us greatly because of the strong foundations of the correct relationships that were set by Confucius. Filial piety would have been ranked higher, maybe like 2 or even 3, if these values didn't die away as much. More and more parents and their children shun these traditional relationships, especially since in America there's a push for individualism and freedom of expression. So maybe your parents If you are Asian, you would understand as they want you to become a doctor, except you want to become an NBA player, except that might be like unacceptable in Chinese or Indian society. But this rise of individualism and freedom of expression is taking these traditional beliefs of listening to your parents and doing exactly what they say. All of these ideas are kind of drifting. Although in many families this still exists, and so this would still have to be ranked number 5 above Judaism and the other religions and impacts. For number 6 on my list, I would probably have to go to Judaism. Although Judaism does not have a lot of as many followers as Christianity and etc., it still has had quite an enormous impact on society today. There are roughly 14 million Jews in this world, and Judaism was kind of the stepping stone for Christianity and Islam, as it was one of the first Abrahamic religions. Now, although it is the stepping stone of Christianity and Islam and etc., Judaism still only has 14 million followers and has not affected the world as greatly as Christianity has, as Christianity has 2.3 billion followers. There's a huge difference between the two numbers, and so I would have to put Judaism after Christianity there. Number 7 on my list would have to go to the spread of Buddhism. One of the major tenets in Buddhism is that it lessened the importance of the caste system. One of the main things in Hinduism, as many have noticed, is the caste system and how there's levels of society, and then the lower societies are just like completely discriminated. So Buddhism thought that this was incorrect or wrong, and so they improved on that, and they simply lessened the importance of the caste system. So this is very favorable to the lower classes, and so this mainly affects the lower classes, as a lot of the lower classes of Hindus switched on to Buddhism. But although a lot of the lower class members did switch, this only constitutes about 6.7 or 7% of the world. So it is not as prevalent as Christianity or Judaism or any of those religions, so it would have to go behind those. Although there are more followers of this religion than are Zoroastrianism, therefore I ranked Zoroastrianism away at a later rank than Buddhism. Number 8 on my list is Hinduism and its art. By depicting religious figures in their art, the Hindus created a tradition of religious art. Art from many different religions help followers worship better and develop them in their religion. Throughout history, you can see religious art be used to glorify divine figures, including current art. Also, before the majority of the population was illiterate, religious art was used to educate and help followers understand religion better through visual stories. A religious art has and always will be used as propaganda, and is used to display emotions over an event or idea, such as the Counter-Reformation. And many of the greatest pieces of artworks are religious in nature. Today we can still feel the effects of religious art despite the many changes in the style of art. And now we can still see the effect of religious art as pieces still fulfill their purpose or have become a landmark masterpieces of the world. By creating this trend of religious artwork, the classical Hindus allowed for us to have another essential way for us to express our emotions about religion. Although religious art is very important to religious institutions, it is not ranked that high on my list because of the separation of church and state, and the scientific revolution lessened our exposure to religion than those before. This work here is a good representation of Hindu art in the classical age. As you can see, the divine figure in the middle has many